Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle, and today I'm flying solo, and I am inspired to come here because I took a sailing class with my son last weekend, or recently, depending on when this airs, and also my oldest dog recently crossed the Rainbow Bridge, and I am realizing I'm just enjoying, which is a very strange thing to say, my triggers and witnessing myself in them. And I'm finding that in and of itself to be an interesting journey. And I thought I would just hop on and be a little transparent, or a lot transparent, about what that looks like for me, and perhaps offer some insight and support for others who are on that journey and feeling a little bit, it's a weird duality, and it feels messy and even a little confusing. And so if you're feeling that way, I'm hoping that this episode may help that. So my dog passed recently, and I'm finding myself, and right after that we had our sailing lessons, like literally the day before he passed, and then the day after we left for our lessons. So in and of itself, learning new things always brings me a little bit of anxiety, and my perfectionism kicks in, and those old triggers of feeling like I can never do anything right, or that the humiliation, so to speak, of not being good enough. Well, that's not even the right word. It's not humiliation. It's more the fear of not being good enough, and being, unlovable and all those things. Like it brings back all of that stuff for me. So it was just an interesting leap because I didn't have a whole lot of time to process my dog's passing. Although I will say we were all there together. We all grieved in a very similar way. And that in and of itself brought me a lot of peace. And I don't feel like there's a ton more of processing to do with that, as far as like the initial, oh my gosh, I can't breathe kind of grief, I know it will still hit me. It has several times. At some point, I'm going to go through pictures. That'll be another cathartic part of my healing grief journey. I like to do that when I'm grieving. Memories bring me pain and comfort on some level. But ultimately, when I start going through memories, it brings me peace and gratitude, like this feeling of I was lucky to love so deeply. So there's that piece. So that just added a layer of complexity to the whole learning new things. And I found myself witnessing myself, I guess. And I've been doing that a lot, like pretty much since my studio was shut down with the pandemic for those 2 to 3 months. I found myself like my highest self stepping out, almost like stepping away and witnessing and holding space for the me that felt like she was crumbling, if that makes sense. And so there's this weird, beautiful, interesting dynamic of witnessing yourself and understanding that you're in a trigger. But I think there's something about like when you understand that this is coming from a piece of you that is in the past and that experienced something that caused a wound, when you can recognize that, and when you have a connection to your highest self, there's a comfort there, there's an inner wisdom there, there's a calm and peace there, even within that chaotic mess of the trigger itself. And the old stories playing through your brain, saying, like in my case, you'll never understand this, you're not good enough, you're unlovable, you're unsuccessful, right? Like all those different things that come in, which is all bullshit stories. I know that, like I do know that. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, in any way, shape, or form, but I also don't have to be lovable. And the journey of doing the work for yourself, understanding when you are in a wounded place, or even just with Lego, that's my dog's name. With him passing, it's not even so much that like, it's not the wound, like the deep wound of a past story. It's more the wound of the loss of what was, which is always a part of healing and growth, and healing a wound and looking at them is like the healing what was, and the grief of the loss, or of what you could have been, sometimes is how it comes in for me. But to acknowledge that I have a sadness for this loss. And I have a deep, deep appreciation and love for the time that I had. I mean, he was almost 14 years old and he was the coolest dog for a million reasons. He would crack a peanut open and eat the peanut out. I mean, what dog does that? Most dogs just gulp it in, He would tell me stories. He would tell everybody stories, but we had this thing where he would start with this low, deep in his belly grumble. It wasn't a bark. It was like a growl, like a grumble. I called it grumble. I would say grumble or tell me a story. And it would start deep in his belly. And it was almost like you could feel the energy bubbling up and out of his mouth. And then he would end it with like a woo woo or sometimes 3 woos. And then he would pause and I would say, okay, tell me more. And then he would go again. And it was just, I don't know. It was the coolest thing. And I am definitely going to miss that. I hear it in my head. So clearly more crying to do, and that's a good thing. And I'm grateful that I am capable of all the emotions within this. But then within the learning new things, or which I really enjoyed, it was crazy cool. It was also interesting for me to witness like the parts I felt really comfortable with, the parts like as we went about the class with Captain Joan was her name. She's with Sail Away Sailing School. She's amazing, and her teaching us things. There was, when I would get a concept, it was like this confidence and like gratitude that like I finally got it, because it's not intuitive for me at all. And then, other bits and pieces that were frustrating, like, this one is hard for me personally, like nothing to do with anyone else on the boat, just more like for me, my brain doesn't work this way. And I have to figure out how I learn and how to get out of my trigger enough to figure that out, right? The trigger of, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't understand what seems like a simple thing to everyone else is how I take it, right? That's how it appears to me, and then figuring out what works best for me. And then being able to communicate that to the people on the sailboat so that, we can help each other learn. And I'm just speaking my experience here, but I witnessed myself several times in states of, they weren't deep, like me 10 years ago would have taken myself to a place of, this is dumb. I don't know how to do this. I'll never understand it. So I'm going to quit. It was never that. It was more determination of, okay, and patience, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually had patience and compassion for myself in a way that was loving and kind, which is new. That's not my normal. I mean, I'm 54 years old, up for my first at least 30, if not 40 years of life. My story was not that. It was definitely impatience, definitely telling myself I would never be good enough. And just, so it's very interesting, and a whole lot of fear when I did learn new things. So I don't know. I just wanted to share the idea that, if you can pause and ask yourself if this might be coming from somewhere else. And if it is coming from somewhere else, what might you need, and what is true today? Like, what is true in this present moment? What is true right now that can help you support yourself when you are equally, in a space of the present and also in a space of the past, in this wound or this trigger that you're, that is being pulled forward because of whatever it is that you're doing. So I find it beautiful because the weekend is over. We passed our training, passed our lessons, we got our certifications, and I still feel like I have so much more to learn. And instead of beating myself up about that, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about exploring what this might look like going forward. I'm not hanging on, where I may or may not have failed. And I'm looking at it from a place of opportunity and new experiences and that sort of a thing, versus like really hanging on those old things. Now, the other thing it does is it opened that door to those old wounds that just tells me I have more stuff to look at. And it's not even just these things that are calling this forward right now, right? Like it's been coming forward for various things over the course of, gosh, I can't remember when it started. I feel like it was this first summit of this year. So January, because 2023 had a lot of different challenges that, as I was navigating them, they felt like necessary and good. Like I was taking the courageous actions. And then once you get done taking those courageous actions, there's like more work to do. There's more healing to happen. There's softness and processing and integration and growth that all happens after that, is how it feels. And so then it's processing all of that. And then often it will pull forward these wounds or these places that you can look at and uncover, reveal, and then heal, and offer that patience, that gratitude, that compassion, and really, again, my biggest thing that I talk about, which I haven't mentioned yet in this podcast, but is community, finding the people that you can lean into and be open and honest with, and just say, gosh, I felt like A, B, and C, and that was uncomfortable for me. And I really am stopping myself from going down a swirl that is an old pattern that's not really accurate today, but I'm finding it coming forward, and I'm choosing to look at it from my highest self place, which is a very different lens than, my 14-year-old self, or, just a different version of me. And then I do find it helpful and useful to go back and offer myself compassion for that time when I didn't have these skills, because I think sometimes I have another tendency to go back and beat myself up at that time period. Like, why didn't I treat myself better? Or why didn't I know this, this piece that I didn't have to beat myself up, or I didn't have to believe these things that I told myself were true without a doubt. Today I show up in a way where it's I could be wrong about everything, and I'm okay with that. In fact, I am going to be, because time changes things and things evolve just like we do. And so, it's important for me not to be rigid, to use my discernment and to really make an intention to connect with my highest self, use my discernment and show up from that place, and reevaluate often and offer patience and compassion and kindness. So I don't know. I just wanted to hop in. I was feeling sad about my dog, and noticing that I was in triggers within that. And then just it tied in with the sailing lessons. And I just was thinking, this isn't something I talk about it with clients, when it comes up in sessions or in group coaching or, in classes and that kind of stuff. But I've never really talked about it quite on this level on the podcast. And I'm hoping that it might be helpful to someone. And if I can support you in any way in learning how to connect with your highest self and to recognize what is a wound and an old story versus, how we can develop and call in the skills that we are building in the now, and use them to address and look at and connect with what is being pulled forward, and then creating that opportunity to find a more accurate perspective, find a more compassionate perspective, and really know and understand that you are coming from that highest self space versus the habits or the patterns of telling yourself untruths. And we get really tricky with ourselves when we're on this healing journey, and we tell ourselves things are true or not true based on things that used to resonate with us, but perhaps don't anymore. But we forget, we waffle in and out of those things. So I'm today, that's kind of what it was about, is the duality of what it's like to be connected to your highest self and be in a wound at the same time, and how messy that can get. I'm hoping that this podcast that I'm recording right now, that this episode is useful and not just completely confusing, because there is a piece of me that thinks I'm rambling on and on about a thing that may or may not make sense to the listener. And I'm going to throw this out there that if it doesn't make sense, reach out to me. Send me an email, michelle@jidwellness.com. Send me an email, reach out to me, ask questions, post on our social media pages, and let me know. We can go deeper. But today I just felt important to get messy, and I think I've succeeded at that, and it feels good to be okay with that as well. So I hope this is helpful to someone out there. And if you have any questions, or if I can support you in any way, please do let me know. I appreciate you listening. I am excited about how 2024 is playing out, or not even 2024, but the second season. I guess that's it. This feels like a wrap for today. I appreciate you being here. Bye. Be you every day.